Hi, everyone, and we are live. We are live here at the Leadership Loft with LaKisha C. Brooks. I am your host, LaKisha C. Brooks, and I have my esteemed and always beautiful co-host with me, Tracey Felton. Tracey, how are you today?
I'm good today. I'm excited to be here, LaKisha.
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk about this topic. We're going to speak about women in today's workplace, what that looks like for us, some of the challenges that we face, some of our personal experiences. We're going to talk about the obligations we have as women, our own personal responsibility, and making sure that we advance and grow our careers. And we're going to talk about what can companies do? Because there are some obligations that I feel, and I'm sure you do as well, and others ladies feel are obligated to assist us in this area as well. And lastly, I want to touch on a little bit about female entrepreneurship. How has that been impacted because of some of the things that we may face or experience in today's workplace? So before we dive into some of our own journey and our own experiences, I want us to talk about a story that I just saw. So for you guys that do not know, I am a huge sports fanatic. Like, I'm not a fan, I'm a fanatic. So my first career, like I thought I was going to be, was on Sports Center. So I grew up saying, hey, I'm going to be a sportscaster. My senior year of high school, we had to talk about what we wanted to do with our career in economics. I did a whole backboard. I was an overachiever, by the way. And I said, I'm going to be on Sports Center. I'm be a sportscaster. So that was my dream job. And we're actually going to talk about some ESPN sportscasters in a second, but I want to start off our show today to talk about Miss Allyson Felix. So Allyson Felix is one of the most decorated track and field athletes of all time. And I remember hearing about Allyson when she was in high school. So she's a few years behind me, and she started off her Olympic career at 18. I mean, Tracey, I don't know about what you were doing at 18, but I was a freshman in college, scared because my mom and daddy left me in Atlanta, and I'm from Valdosta. So that's what I was doing, and she is running in the Olympics. So when Allyson got pregnant, she was dropped from Nike and started her own journey with athletic wear, and now she is off to I want to say her 5th Olympics. And so that is incredible in itself. So I saw a story about Allyson where she has teamed up with Athleta, which is now her sponsor. And she also teamed up with the Women's Sports Foundation. And they've created a grant, a $200,000 that actually provides 9 athletes with the opportunity to have childcare at the Olympics this year in Tokyo. And for me, I was like, wow. This is really big that she's able to do this, because I also read in the article that she was saying how tough it must be for women. And she's thinking about how it is for her to just have Cammie with her. Her daughter's name is Cammie, and, you know, taking her to different track meets and things like that, and how some women don't have the opportunity to have their kids with them. And there was times when she was running track where she was breastfeeding. And she wrote in there about how she didn't want to disturb a teammate, you know, in a hotel room. Because she's going to have her little baby with her. Tracey, when we heard this story, I mean, what came to your mind when you heard that Allyson was providing these 9 athletes with the opportunity to have childcare on site with them at the Olympics? What were some of your thoughts?
First of all, I thought that was amazing. And second of all, it brought to the forefront to me that I don't even think people even think of women athletes as mothers.
Oh my.
I don't even think that comes across their minds. So to see that this was done, it was like, wow, you know, because now they get to be acknowledged as mothers, you know. Now they get to actually do their job as mothers. They can be more focused, because they're not worried about, you know, who's taking care of the baby. Are they okay back at home? The baby or the child is with them. So, I mean, this was big to me.
Yeah, it was really big. And I definitely, again, want to shout out her partners in that, Athleta, which is her company that she works with for her athletic line and the Women's Sports Foundation for putting this together. And I want to make sure that I give credit to the foundation, and it is the Powers of She Fund. It's the child care grants that she has allotted for 9 other athletes there at Tokyo. It's very interesting to me because I had one of my male colleagues post something on my page about it. He says, well, why should she have to do this? Why should she have to drive this forward? Why not the Olympic Committee to do this? Why not, even our country, United States track and field? Why not have them do it? Why does she even have to feel the onus to put this on her shoulder to do this? So that's when we talk about having that support around us and having the support around the governing bodies of the organizations to make sure that this is taken care of as well. But I agree with you. And I never even thought about that until you said it, is that, do we even see our female athletes as mothers? Are we even associating with that to understand that, yes, they're athletes, they are swimming, they're jumping, they're lifting, they're doing all these things, but they're also bearing children. Yeah, they're bearing children. And what they're also doing is taking care of their kids, like you said. And some of them are actually breastfeeding and nursing.
Yes.
And so we have to make sure that we're not disassociating motherhood from those athletes. And it even goes back to, I remember Skylar Diggins-Smith talked about this and how she felt that she was actually playing basketball while pregnant for a little bit of time. Yeah. And she was just talking about some of the struggles that she dealt with as well when it came to, motherhood and her journey and the WNBA and things like that. So we are just seeing this across the board with athletes and motherhoods and some of the struggles that they're having to face to overcome things and to be seen as mothers. So that was a really great point that you brought up there, Tracey, as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to switch gears and talk about another story that when we talk about athletes and we talk about womanhood and trying to climb the ladder and have that equity, because what we saw Allyson doing is trying to provide that equity for women in sports, making sure the playing field is level for everyone to be able to do their job. And to your point, how can I really be focused if I'm worrying about nursing or where's my kid or like, is he or she okay? So she's providing the equity for women. But what happens when we are actually fighting each other as women, when we're actually doing this, when we know that we're facing all kinds of obstacles, and you and I are going to talk about later some of the obstacles that we face and we see women face. What happens when we're doing this? And so we recently heard about a story between Maria Taylor, Rachel Nichols. And this is where it goes back to me, because my whole life I thought I was going to end up on ESPN, and I'm okay that I am not on SportsCenter. It's okay. I'm still having a really great career. And if you all are not aware, we saw a story where Rachel Nichols was speaking on the diversity hire of Maria Taylor when it came to covering the finals, the NBA finals, and was saying some things such as she understands the fight when it comes to diversity as a female, because she said she had to fight that. But she said that she did not think that it should be at the expense of her for Maria to get the job. So it just it really made a lot of people uncomfortable. I know that Rachel Nichols did issue a public apology to Maria and start off by saying, in journalism school, they tell us not to be the story and tell the story. But Tracey, when you heard that story and you heard some of the things that Rachel was saying in relations to Maria, knowing, and she even said it, the struggles we already face as women in a lot of industries, especially in sports, how did it make you feel to see another woman basically saying, this person shouldn't get this if it's just based on her race, knowing how hard it is for women in sports and journalism?
I thought it was very interesting that she acknowledged that there was an issue, but at the same time, she put herself almost separate from the issue too.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So it was kind of a double-edged sword to an extent. And I thought that it was unfair. It was kind of like she didn't want Maria to be the token, taking her shine away from her, as if Maria herself didn't deserve it.
Right.
Based on her work. And that's unfortunate. I see a lot of that in the workforce with women competing with each other constantly. But the question that I have is, did they create that competition themselves?
The women themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I compete in pageants, or I used to, and I always say there's one crown and there's a whole bunch of girls competing for that one crown.
Mm-hmm.
And you go to the depths to win that crown. I'm actually judging a pageant tomorrow, as a matter of fact. I will not be competing, but I am judging. But it kind of goes, thank you. It goes back to what you're saying, is that, was that intentional or unintentional competition already there?
Right.
That's a great point. And all of a sudden we see it coming out because maybe there was already competition there, whether they did it intentionally or not. Because again, it's like a pageant. There's only so many spots. At least with the ESPN, they have a few spots. All right. In pageant, there's only one crown. But there's so many spots, and you want that spot as that woman that you may be competing with another woman, and you're not even realizing that you're doing it anyway.
See,
so
that's
when he gets it, you're very upset because you were competing with her for that spot. Again, whether it was intentional, unintentional. Yeah, that could have been the case. And we didn't even realize that there might have been competition already there between these two.
Right.
That maybe neither one of them were even aware of.
And I thought it was very interesting that Maria didn't respond, and it's like, okay, why didn't she respond? Did she already know that competition was there, or was she surprised? Was she hurt? I think it's good because they said that she's negotiating a contract.
Yes.
So it might have worked in her favor, the whole scenario, the way it came out.
Right.
But I really want to know, I would love to know her thoughts.
Right. What were her thoughts to
her
woman?
Yeah, and her experiences.
Right. So she's another woman. She is a woman of color. So is that we talk about intersectionality.
Yes.
Does that make that even more of a competition?
Right.
Because these are both women. Yes, we are competing, but then you have one that is a woman of color who may be facing additional double discrimination, which she actually did. So from being not only a woman, because as you said, Rachel acknowledged there was some diversity issues when it came to women, and now Maria is facing something else from a fellow woman when it comes to race.
Right.
That can be extremely tough to swallow. So to your point, it would be interesting to understand, how Maria does feel about this situation and what they made her feel like, both as a woman and as a Black woman in her seat at ESPN as well. So absolutely. So we talked about two big stories that have been out recently when we talk about women and equity, women and intersectionality. And so let's just talk about some of the struggles and experiences that we have faced and you and I have faced. So Tracey, talk to me about what are some of the things, experience or challenges that you have faced as a woman in the workplace?
My field that I'm in right now is dominated by women, actually. So I see the competition a lot. I see the competition a whole lot. And I feel like we tend to work harder. And something else that I see us doing is that we will take over the work of someone who's not meeting the standard,
Right.
So we voluntarily add on more work for ourselves, which leads to burnout. Yeah, it leads to burnout. Like it's almost like we don't draw a line. It's okay, well, I'll do this. We just add on more. I'll do that. I'll do this. But, stay later and longer, not that that's a spoken requirement, but it's something that we do and people allow us to do it.
Right.
No one says, hey, that's enough. You've done enough. Don't take that project on. We'll get someone else to do it. They kind of just allow you to go ahead on and do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you are in a field that's dominated by women. And so for me, my journey, I started in sales and I ended up in training and development. And I remember telling one of my professors at Central Michigan University, by the way, amazing school. So shout out to Central Michigan University. And I remember telling him that in my consulting role and what I want to do, I don't want to just be a consultant. I want to have a consulting company, firm that is a leading one, a leading consulting company and brand that can stand alongside those really large organizations, because a lot of those organizations that have been founded, those DDIs, Deloitte's, things like that, very great, notable companies, were started or ran by men. And I want to have a company that can have the same reputation and we do the same great work as a woman. Because typically when we look at leadership development gurus, talent development gurus, things like that, they're men. And I want to break through that. So I work really hard to make sure that, you know, my I's are dotted, my T's are crossed, because I have to do that. Like sometimes I feel like I have to be better than so that I can get the same respect when it comes to that type of stuff. So I raise my hand a lot. I ask, can I be a part of stuff? Someone emailed me about an event and I joined. It was a free event. And I said, well, tell me, how can I be one of the experts on this as well? Like, I want to know what I can do to actually be seen as an expert too. So I'm always putting myself out there and trying to put myself out there through my experience and my journey. Another thing that I've experienced as a woman in the workplace is sexual harassment. So I've definitely, you're like, been there, done that. I've experienced that as well. And I remember working for an organization and I got smacked on my hiney, not once, but twice, and in an organization, and it was extremely uncomfortable. And of course I took it to HR and things like that, but that's something that does happen. And like I said, I felt comfortable enough to speak out about the situation. But think about how many women get sexually harassed and may not feel comfortable or have the psychological safety to actually say anything about, you know, what they experience and when it comes to sexual harassment as well. And so I'll let you kind of talk about that, because I saw your face when I said that. Again, because like I said, it's something that I have experienced and it's very uncomfortable. And of course, did the right thing in speaking out about it.
Yeah. And that happens a lot. I think it happens a lot in my field of education. And what's the difficult part of it is, many times, not all the time, you know, it can be male colleagues, but it can also be the person that's in charge, you know, someone who has the power. And then are you really going to say anything? You know, do you really feel comfortable speaking up? That kind of thing. It's a very uncomfortable feeling. Absolutely. It's very uncomfortable. And more than one person can second the fact that that person is being a sexual harasser, but no one really says anything.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Fear of retaliation, emotion, losing your job. I mean, like a lot of things can make you feel afraid. To even speak out or say anything. You're absolutely right. And so another thing that I really think about when it comes to, you know, my journey is, and it goes back to what Allyson Felix and Skylar Diggins had dealt with, is like being a mother in the workplace. And I'm not a mother yet, but that's a lot of things that, like, something that crossed my mind is like, how do you manage that? And luckily for me now, I run my own consulting company, so I have more freedom to do that. But even so, even with your own business, you still have to consider all those different things when you talk about motherhood and that journey that comes along with having a career, whether you're working for someone else or you're working, you know, for an organization or yourself. You have to consider what that looks like for you.
Right. Yeah.
For me, before I started doing this full time for myself, that was always a question. Like, okay, is it going to impact me moving up? How do I carry this baby on my arm and, you know, try to be this corporate, you know, big shot person thing? You know, what happens when they're sick? If we look at what we just saw with COVID-19, we saw a lot of mothers who are primary caregivers, not the only ones, but primary caregivers that had to take time off from work. I know I watched my sister a lot, and I, you know, helped out a lot too while watching my niece. But a lot of stuff that she had to deal with, taking some days off, if Ariana, you know, school was out or something like that, like when Ariana got COVID, my sister had to be out too. That's something I'm thinking, okay, how do I manage and juggle that? And you were a working mother, so how did you juggle that? And I think you have 3 boys.
Yeah.
How did you juggle that in the workplace?
You know, I had family support, parental support, actually. My parents were very supportive. But even still, you don't want to, if you have multiple children, if one gets sick, you can guarantee the others are going to get sick. So you may have needed to be off Monday and Tuesday of this week. Next week, you need to be off Tuesday and third, the week after. But you don't want to have to go and say, well, I need to be off because my child is sick. You know, that's the thing. You almost, I don't want to say, you kind of deny yourself what you should be doing, you know, because there are always programs that you need to go to, honor roll assemblies, things like that, that I have missed. I have one of my children, I hate to admit it, I hadn't been to any of his honor roll assemblies until about 2 years ago because I didn't want to keep taking off, you know. So it's a lot of denying your children actually suffer when you don't really have the support that you need.
Yeah, and I heard of something called mother's guilt.
Yes.
You have that a lot, the mother's guilt.
Oh,
how is
yeah.
that for you, that mother's guilt?
It's a real thing. And then you try to make up for it, you know what I mean, in other ways. But you know what? It leaves the mother exhausted, like completely exhausted, because you're trying to please everybody. You know, you're trying to please the people of the job. You're trying to make up for the fact that you're gone all day with the children and you're burnt out. That's why I understand why a lot of people, a lot of women, I know a few, started their own business during COVID. Because they were able to be home and be a mother and work, and they didn't have to sacrifice anything.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That kind of leads us to our topic of female entrepreneurship. And I can see that because, I just started this full-time entrepreneurship, but I can definitely see that. Of course, there's still some struggles and challenges you'll deal with as well, being an entrepreneur and being a mother, but definitely to that point where, like, I mean, I'm sitting in an office now and there's, I think, 1, 2, 3 other rooms here. So we just put little Liam in the room over here, right beside mommy.
Right.
And we're still good, right? And this is, again, goes back to what we said with Allyson, is that, are we providing childcare when we see people in the workplace? They're not. So as a female entrepreneur who's also a mother, you're able to have that. The child can be there. If you have that support, like you said, at home, that person can assist you as well. But definitely you've seen that in droves, because a lot of women are now able to have that really, like, real work-life balance.
Yes.
That we hear about so much, that people want. They're able to create that themselves and not rely on an organization to give them that work-life balance. Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yep. So let's talk about, our own personal, like, obligations, like things that we can do to actually help us, whether it is building our brands or whether it's moving up in corporate America or education. In your case, what are some of the obligations we have to ourselves? And I know for me, like, some of the things that we as women can do is challenging the status quo, being that challenger, and I spoke earlier about psychological safety, and the level 4 of that, what we have with Dr. Timothy Clark is that challenger safety. Are we as women afraid to challenge the status quo? And we should not be. We have to be able to say, look, this is not right. This is what we should do. And we also should not penalize our women who want to speak out. Right. And who want to take a stand. And we don't want to face something called that likability bias that we see, where if women are more aggressive,
right,
more abrasive, we call them angry. Is that what we call them?
Yes.
Angry, or not so nice B word.
Right.
Allowing women to challenge without being seen as aggressive or mean or things like that is something that we can do. And I know as women, sometimes we have to do that. We have to be aggressive, but why is it at the expense of us being liked versus a man who can do that? And we're just like, yes, Charles, he was very aggressive in that meeting, so that's something we can do. And also when we say challenging the status quo, get into opportunities or jobs that are not normal, quote unquote, using my air quotes, normal, for a woman, that's atypical for a woman. That can also help us as well. Like Tracey, I tried to dabble in technology. No. I'll stick with owning a very successful global consulting firm. The technology wasn't for me. So things like that. My dad works for Goodyear, and he talks about sometimes he'll see some of the women come in there and really try to do some mechanical work, which I think is great. So just really challenging ourselves to step outside the norms
Yes.
that we're supposed to do as women can definitely help us as well. Also, maybe even getting a sponsor versus a mentor can help us as well. So, I mean, Tracey, what are some things that you think that we can do as women ourselves to help us advance?
I think the first thing that we need, the very first thing that a lot of women need to do is to genuinely get comfortable in their own skin.
Oh, yeah.
So that they will be able to speak out, without worrying about what others think, how they're going to be viewed. And you spoke about doing jobs that many times we don't see women doing. I am on TikTok a lot, believe it or not.
Crazy. I'm not even on TikTok. I don't even understand it.
Oh boy. And so there's this one girl, she's 24 years old. She's 5'3". She looks like she weighs about 115 pounds. And do you know she's a trucker?
Oh, wow.
And I watch her every day. I watch her lives. I'm on it because it just, for me, it breaks the status quo that I have in my mind.
Right.
About what a trucker is, So I think we as women, we also need to work on what we view our jobs to be,
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So you said, I love that you said we have to be comfortable with ourselves to even be able to have that psychological safety to challenge. And it's like, well, how do some women do that? And it goes back to that likability bias that we just talked about, is that being comfortable, if you know that, I know for me, like when it comes to sales, I'm really aggressive. Like I want to hit my goals. I don't want anything to come my way, and owning that and saying, hey, this is how I am.
Yes.
And I accept that. And I know for me in my personal journey, being comfortable with who I am, it's taken some time.
Yes.
But now we're talking about being who we are and being comfortable who we are professionally, because we put on two different faces, right? Our personal face and then the face we put on professionally. And it can take some time to feel comfortable with who you are as an employee, as a manager, as a leader, to feel that safety to share that. So Tracey, what are some things that you do to say, I'm comfortable being me professionally, and I can show that side of myself and not feel embarrassed or feel like I have to hide myself?
I do a lot of reading, actually. That's one thing that I do, a lot of reading, and I have conversations with other women who want to be the best version of themselves.
Right.
I think the company that you keep is very important, and those that you keep around you are very important. And having someone who's your accountability partner for, hey, this is going on at the job, what do you think I should do? Just being able to have sisterhood. We don't have sisterhood too much these days, but a sisterhood really, I think, helps.
Absolutely. And you kind of talked about that. Like when we talk about sisterhood, how can we have that if we're competing with each other? Constantly competing with each other. And so, having those groups of women, whether it's a virtual group of women, there's a lot of groups on social media that are for women to support each other, lift each other up, to feel comfortable with oneself, sharing stories like we're sharing today.
Yes.
To help, because there may be someone right now that says, you know what, I dealt with that. I experienced that too. And so it makes them feel that there's nothing wrong with speaking out and challenging. You're not that B word they told you are. You're not angry. And then we laugh about this, an inside joke between Tracey and I, because she was called angry during a session. And it was funny because we laughed about that before our session today, because she was told that. And it broke my heart because I know Tracey. And but she has been called that in her work setting, and say, Tracey, it's okay, but you're not that. Right. And understanding you're not that. And so making sure that we don't carry the terms that we are called, we don't carry that with us. And I had to talk to Tracey about that and Tracey, I hope you don't mind me sharing.
Oh, go ahead.
And so when Tracey told me that, she told me that she was wearing that burden and that hurt, if you will, for weeks. And I said, Tracey, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me that you felt this way when someone told you this? Because we can talk about it together. I'm your sister. Let's talk about it together. So I don't want you feeling that way because someone said something to you.
Right.
Then now you're thinking, well, am I actually angry?
Right.
Right? Because we have a tendency to think like, am I really aggressive? Am I the B word?
Right, right.
To me. So definitely having that sisterhood where we can reach out and talk about these things to share our journey and our stories is very important as well. And so, we were just talking about the obligations that we have as women. And let's think about the organizations that we all work for. When I think about some organizations, and I keep referring back to Allyson Felix because it really resonated with me that she was able to do that. And it goes back to Jay Gordon. I'll shout you out, Jay, who actually wrote that to ask, why should she have to be obligated to do that? So it goes back to companies having that on-site childcare. Now, I understand that there will be some people that say, what about the cost for that? Well, let's think about the ROI and the risk of not doing that. How many women are you possibly losing? Great, talented women that you're possibly losing to entrepreneurship. We just talked about this because they don't have a work-life balance. They don't have someone to take care of their child, and childcare costs are ridiculously high.
Oh, yeah.
So sometimes we need to ask the company, like, why don't you do a comprehensive ROI, maybe analysis and study to see, is this actually beneficial for your organization before we say, well, we don't want that, or even the liability of kids on site. I mean, there's a lot of arguments against childcare on site. And let's think about the positive side of that as well. So that's one thing that our organizations can do is offer that for women as well. Having sponsorship programs. So I spoke about mentorship and sponsorship programs. They're very different. Making sure that you have those programs in place that whenever there's a opportunity for advancement or a new role for a certain level, why are we not having a sponsorship program where all of a sudden we can pick from those talented women?
Right.
And we can speak to their work. We're not just saying, hey, Tracey and LaKisha, let's go with them. We can say, hey, no, I'm going to sponsor LaKisha. We're sponsoring Tracey. I've seen their work. They work with me on projects.
Right.
And I've actually seen them lead. So we can do things like that is recognizing and put those pipelines in place for talented women, and it even starts with recruiting.
Yes.
Recruiting great women as well. Where are we finding women? There's so many organizations that you can even partner with to find talented women as well.
Yes.
What are you doing to retain them, keep them in your organization? Are you giving them some incentive to stay with you?
Right.
So those are some of the things that I have seen in organizations that perhaps they can do to try to engage women to help to just kind of keep women and retain women in the workplace. So Tracey, what are some things that you have seen, or maybe some tips that you can give to organizations?
I think you mentioned one that I think is major, and that is on-site childcare.
Oh yeah.
Like that would cut out so much stress too, because you're able to bring your child with you to work and they go to the center. I know that my school system, they have a daycare center. Mind you, it's 123 schools. So you can imagine how many employees we have. One daycare center.
Wow.
And there is a long waiting list, Now, I think it's discounted too. Like it's not as high as the regular rates are, but just one center for all of the staff. And it's a wait list, and 9 times out of 10, you don't get in.
Wow.
So I think that would be really, really good. And I think putting things in place to help people enforce their boundaries as a woman in the workplace. You know what I mean? Having cutoff times for doing their work. You know what I mean? Not watching people stay at work till 7 and 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night when they got off at 4:30. What are you going to do about that?
Right. Yeah. And you talked about the childcare. Maybe that can be some type of subsidized childcare as well. I know that there's organizations, I think it's care.com, if I'm not mistaken, where organizations can partner with and maybe offer some type of discounts or some type of incentives or things like that, where at least you can offset the costs for childcare as well, because sometimes also the cost for it as to why women decide to do, you're like, oh yeah, why they decide to go into entrepreneurship or go to an organization where they are able to work from home or things like that. Another thing that organizations can do is try to do some sort of equitable pay analysis, because we know that there is a pay gap when we talk about men and women in the workplace, and that gap actually widens as we talk about women of color. That number definitely widens a little bit more. So our organizations being accountable for actually having that equitable pay analysis to actually look to see if they're fairly paying women the same as men. And if they notice that there's some type of discrepancy, what are they doing to actually take care of that as well? It's one thing to say, oh, we analyzed it and we see that Jack is making more than Jill. Okay, so what are we going to do about that? How are we going to make up for that gap that we're seeing for these two employees as well? So that's something that organizations can do, is definitely making sure they're assessing that. And then not just pay, but assessing number of women in leadership roles. Right. Are we actually looking at that as well? Are we looking at the rate at which women are promoted? So, and I'm a records data person, even though I'm not a math fan, I do like to look at data when it comes to trends and patterns and things like that. So we can go very deep with our data to see how well are we performing when we talk about an equitable workplace for both male and female when it comes to that as well. And another thing that I would actually look for us to do is making sure that we provide equitable resources to our trans women as well. Let's not let our trans women get lost in our conversation. Yes. About women in the workplace, because trans women's journey is a lot different than a cis woman. And for those that don't know, cis is I'm biologically born and identify as female. So are we providing resources for our trans women so they also feel that they're having an equitable workplace as well? So that's something that companies really need to take a look at for themselves and challenge their own status quo when it comes to recognizing not just those cis women or those biological women, but also trans women as well. So. And
the psychological safety of the trans women.
Yes.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Yes, that's definitely something to think about as well, because again, as we talked about, that's that intersectionality that we talked about. You know, the experiences of one woman may not be the same as another just because we're women. And it goes back to what you're saying, is understanding the psychological safety when it comes to our trans women in the workplace, and understand the psychological safety of all our women, and understanding we don't want to put all of our women in some sort of like silo where we're just like all the same. Okay, we're gonna do all this for all the women. When again, okay, and if we go back to the example of childcare, that's great. I love that. And what about your women who are not parents?
Right.
I'm not a parent.
Right.
I plan to be, and I hope to one day have children. Right now, I'm not a mother. So again, are we making sure that we're taking care of all women? And I know it's hard, right? Because there's so many different needs. And, you know, when we talk about multidimensional areas of diversity or intersectionality, but just making sure we're not doing blanket stuff across the board to say, women, check.
Right.
Good. Yes. So that's something that we want to consider as well. Any other thoughts, Tracey, when it comes to organizations and maybe some things that they can do? Because there may be organizations listening to us now that may say, I never even thought about that.
I know. And I think organizations would benefit from asking their women what it is that they feel like they need from that particular organization. Just ask. You get a lot of information that way too. Because a lot of times when we think we know what they need, it's not necessarily the case.
Absolutely. So those maybe town hall meetings, fireside chats, maybe they have employee resource groups. So maybe they have a women's resource, employee resource group, going asking those questions. And it goes back to what we're saying about employee experience, hearing from the different voices, different women. And again, is it a way to satisfy every woman and every woman's individual needs? No. We know that's not possible. However, if you're able to, like you said, survey the group of women maybe you can get a consensus, or maybe you can see the top 3-5 things that the women in the organization as a whole are saying. So it's not a blanket. It's like we listen to these different groups, and from that, the consensus is X, Y, and Z. Right. And then they can put plans in place to ensure that we're taking care of our women in the workplace. So that's a really good point that we can do as well with organizations.
And that's what I was going to say too, LaKisha. You touched on something. Once you get the results of the survey, once you find out what it is the women need, then immediately go into action. Like, what is your plan of action? What is the action plan to be able to implement these things that the women are telling you that they need?
Absolutely. How many times do we see surveys, focus groups, fireside chats, listening sessions, whatever it is, and all of a sudden, like, nothing
changes.
Nothing changes at all. We don't see any changes. So Tracey, I know that you have done some entrepreneurship work yourself.
Oh yeah.
And so how do you feel that some of the barriers that we talked about and challenges as women in the workplace, how do you think that has influenced, or has it, your decision to become an entrepreneur?
I think it has. One thing about entrepreneurship is that there's really no ceiling as to how much money you can make.
Bingo.
And you don't have to worry about being discriminated against from a company based on pay. You know what I mean? Because you decide that. That's up to you. So I think that's one major benefit, you know, that your pay is not at a ceiling. You're not capped off here at all.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's beneficial. And we know that one of the fastest group of entrepreneurs is Black women. So we talk about women, talk about Black women, definitely growing our businesses and things like that. So I definitely think that there can be a correlation. Definitely would love to see some more research around that.
Yeah.
Surveying women who have left the workplace to become entrepreneurs, or those that have side gigs, side hustles, and things like that, to see if the reason for this is some of the challenges that they may deal with in the workplace. I definitely, I was actually in the process of doing some research like this and then got really busy, but I would love to kind of see some correlations with that. I know for me, part of the reason of my journey of entrepreneurship, and I've actually had my business on the side, if you will, for since 2012, like off and on, and just not embarked on it full time. Some of that for me was the opportunity to also express and showcase my talents and abilities, where I didn't get a chance to do some of that in my actual roles. If I'm interested in something, or I went out and got a certificate or certification or a degree, and you're not able to actually utilize it, I said, okay, well, I'm going to utilize it myself in my own company. That way, no one can, not only can they cap your pay, but they can also cap the abilities you have and stifle your growth. And I do not want that. So that's part of the reason that I did it as well. And to your point, pay as well, is that, yeah, you may deal with some, when you talk about your vendors and your clients, but that's about learning how to negotiate. You need to know how to negotiate, get the contracts or whatever you need from potential clients and things like that. So that's one of the things that I did as far as why I wanted to do it. When it came to moving up in the organization, I am the CEO. I am. I'm already there. I've already made it. Like, I just elevated myself up to, C-suite, right? So a lot of times, women want to get on that path of moving up, C-suite. They want to become a CEO or whatever they want to become. And the quickest way to that for a lot of us women is to just become CEO.
Yes.
Organization. That way we don't have to wait for a raise or a promotion or something like that for 25 years to actually become that. Or we may get stuck in our role for so long.
Yeah.
So again, that's another reason why for me, I'm able to do that and put my hands in a lot of different pots and to become that leader that I wanted to be in an organization. Because I was getting stuck at a certain level.
Oh yeah.
Management level, but I'm like kind of stuck right here.
Yeah. I agree with you, because you can get stuck in the classroom like me.
Absolutely.
30 years. Now, have I applied for different positions? Yes, but I never got them. But I could guarantee you that many people don't know the skills that I have. You know what I mean? I've never really been able to. I have one principal, and I love her dearly to this day because she let me display all of the different skills, some of the many different skills that I have. And she pushed me to do that. But you don't get to do that often. And that's what entrepreneur, like you're saying, entrepreneurship provides for you. You can display and show and use all of your talents and gifts, and you're not stifled.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that you stress she, because we talked about competition and what happens if we're lifting other lady up, or that next lady up to get her where she wants to go. So yes, we want sponsorship from our male colleagues. Sometimes we have to sponsor each other.
We do.
And lift our next sister up in the sisterhood to give her the opportunities that we had, versus I worked very hard to get here, to be in my C-suite or entrepreneur or whatever we do when we get there, and say, oh, no. I'm not about to let another woman come in here and take my shine, my crown. When I had to work hard, I'm not giving her the easy road. We have to get out of that mindset to say, no, you remember that hard road that you had to take? Let it be easier for her by lifting her up and helping her to overcome some of those barriers that you had to face in the workplace as well. So when we talk about sponsorship, we want to make sure, again, how are we utilizing our male colleagues as allies?
Yes.
Are our male colleagues advocating and sponsoring us? So those males that have gotten there as well, are you raising your hand to say, I want to have LaKisha and I want to have Tracey have the opportunity to do this as well? But I can tell you one thing for me, Tracey, I don't know about you. Do not give me an opportunity because I'm a woman. Give me the opportunity because I earned it based on my merit, based on my qualifications and my skills. And I go to like Becky Hammond, and I give all these sports references, guys, because I watch sports. I told you in the beginning, I'm a sports fanatic. So she said a wonderful thing about not getting the Portland Trail Blazers job. She said that she wants to get the job because of her qualifications. And I said, right on, Becky. I think I wrote that actually on the post. Right on, Becky. Because I'm with her. Like, yes, we want to have our women advance and we want sponsors, but don't give it to me because I'm a woman. Give it to me because I have the qualification. I just happen to be a woman.
Exactly.
Right. That is what I would want, is to be known for my skill set, not my gender.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know if you've ever experienced that, Tracey, but for me, that's definitely something I really try to fight for, is to make sure that I'm qualified. I'm the best qualified candidate for this.
Right. And see, that part I don't experience much because, like I said, my field is driven by mostly women. But you know, something that you said, being comfortable, being able to lift your sister up and say, hey, come on, let's go. That goes back to that point that I talked about earlier when I said being comfortable in your own skin. Because the more comfortable you are with yourself, the more you can lift somebody up, the more you can push somebody, may even to exceed past you, you know?
Right. Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. And I love what you said. It's all about being comfortable with yourself in your position, to know that she is not a threat.
Right.
You know, she wants the same opportunities as you. And we together want to make this journey easier for one another, because we all fighting it. You know, we all are on the same journey together. So if we go back to, you know, Maria and Rachel, and even Rachel said this, and you mentioned this earlier, you know, the journey that she's on as a woman. Yes, she's on a different journey as a person of color, but you know the journey. And I remember when I used to watch SportsCenter, and there was like Linda Cohn and Robin Roberts. There's just like a few of them, and I'm just like, no, I'm gonna be on there. And to see that there's so many women now, but there was so many women that had to fight for a little girl like me to say, I can be on SportsCenter, like I can sit here and I can actually talk about sports and be respected. And because of my sports knowledge, it was women that had to literally pave the way and pull the other woman up to be able to see it. Now, when you look at SportsCenter, it's like not even a big deal now to see a woman, debating sports, covering sports, writing sports, so common now than me being an 8-year-old girl watching Sports Center saying, I want to do this too.
Right.
But we have to be able to open the door for our fellow sister and not compete with her, knowing that even though it's more common now, there's still discrimination in a fight that we have to fight.
Oh yeah.
Because at the end, we're still fighting it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And what do you think that does, Tracey, if they see two women fighting? It like sets us back a few years.
It does.
Lifting each other up. So
this is what I want to ask you, LaKisha, since you are into sports. Have you ever heard of Jane Kennedy? Do you remember?
Yes, she's a sportscaster.
Yeah. Okay.
Young lady, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Do you know her?
Well, she was a big deal when I was younger, but mostly because of her beauty. But I remember when I went to actually read about her, to research her, she was a sportscaster.
Did some sportscasting. She sure did. Yeah, back in her day. So yeah, again, there was a few that were doing some of that, and Jane Kennedy was definitely one of the few ladies that was covering sports in those days as well.
Yeah, she was.
Yeah, she was. Speaking of sports, are you watching the NBA Finals?
No, ma'am.
Tracey's like, no, ma'am. That's all you.
The only sports that I'm a fanatic about sports is boxing.
Really?
Oh my goodness, yeah. Since I was about 5.
I like boxing, but today's boxing,
it's not the same.
Not so much. Back in the day, boxing, not so much.
Right.
Yeah, but it's definitely one of my biggest pastimes is sports, playing sports, watching sports, being part of that. And so this topic is so passionate to me because even now when I debate sports, it's like, oh, she's a girl or whatever. It's like, does my brain not work the same? Right. My brain works the same, right? I just thought I'd check, right? So I know about sports. I've been watching sports. I cover sports. I used to have a sports column years ago.
Really?
Yeah, I did. I did a lot of sports blogging, a lot of column writing when it came to sports. But you still, as a woman, still fight through a lot of that. Even now, I'm in sports groups, and it's a few women that chime in, and of course, they want to give you all the stats, and you're like, I kind of know this too, right? I know about sports. Right. And it's the same thing about going into those atypical roles where women have to constantly prove that they know something, that they understand the topic because, well, you're a woman. So do you really know football? Do you really know how to fix a car? Do you really know technology?
Right.
And you find yourself having to defend yourself more than that male who may know less than you, but because he's a male, he's just automatically gets a pass to know stuff. So that's something that, of course, in my interest of sports, I've seen a lot of as well as questioning certain things when it comes to my knowledge. So absolutely. So Tracey, you want to give any last thoughts or comments or anything like that before we conclude our show? I just want everyone to hear from you. What are your last minute thoughts?
I just want to tell women to just stand in your truth, and don't be afraid in the workplace. Speak up for yourself. Speak up not only for yourself, but for other women as well, because it's not an individual fight. It's a collective. It's not even a fight, but it's a collective journey. I like that. Yeah. It's a collective journey. And I think people will hear us more if we work together more so than fight each other. Absolutely. I definitely love those last minute quotes and thoughts. And so, yeah, definitely making sure that we stand together, united, pulling our sister up. Yeah. Making sure we have our own personal accountability to know that sometimes we are holding ourselves back. So whether it is not standing up, whether it's not challenging the status quo, whether it is allowing competition to get the best of us to the point where we're actually stifling ourselves because we want to fight the next sister versus lifting her up as well. And then to the organizations, making sure you're doing your due diligence, making sure you're recognizing your trans women in the workplace, making sure that your workplace is equitable through salary, through opportunities, through promotions,
through accessibility, making sure that you're providing all the resources that you need for your women in the workplace as well. So those are some of my last minute thoughts when it comes to women in the workplace. And Tracey, you and I have worked together so well. And for those that do not know, Tracey is one of Brooks Enterprise consultants, and she has done a fabulous job. And so we're not just telling you some things that we don't do. Tracey had an interest in this, and she's trying to transition into her next career after she retires. And I'm like, come on, sister, let me help you. Like, let me lift you up. Come on this contract with me and learn from me so that you can maybe take over at some point in the future. So again, we're not just telling you something that we're not practicing. Right. We're doing this ourselves, and she and I will continue to work together. And then when we see another sister that needs us or wants to work with us, we will make sure to
pull her along too
as well, to make sure that we're all sustaining and winning together. So I want to thank each and every one of you all for joining us today for the Leadership Loft with LaKisha Brooks and my special co-host, who you will see again, Miss Tracey Felton. And until next time, which will be 2 weeks from today, we shoot our show bi-weekly live on LinkedIn. So make sure to check us out as well. I want you to learn, live, leave a legacy. Again, this is LaKisha C. Brooks from the Leadership Loft. Have a wonderful Thursday.